Hello, my dear friend. Today, I'm excited to share a story of persistence, self discovery, and a step by step journey toward fluency in spoken English. I know how hard it can be to understand English well, but feel frozen when trying to speak. Speaking a language fluently requires more than just knowing words, it involves gaining confidence, finding a rhythm, and learning to speak in a way that feels as natural as thinking. So, today, we'll walk alongside Alex, a young man who embarked on this journey and found his own way to become confident in speaking English. He'll explain everything he learned, his methods, and how he overcame each obstacle along the way. Through Alex's story, you'll find tips, strategies, and real experiences that show how to improve spoken English bit by bit. With every small win, he gained more confidence, and by the end of his journey, he could express himself easily. So, let's dive into this story of determination and see what we can learn from Alex's experience. Hello, my name is Alex. I'm about to share my personal journey to speak English confidently, a journey that has been full of small lessons, challenges, and steps toward my goal. When I first started, I could understand English, but speaking was a different story. My mind would go blank, and I'd second guess every word. But over time, I learned it was okay to feel uncomfortable. That was just part of the process. Let's break down the steps that help me go from shy and hesitant to someone who can express himself freely. Label 1: Building confidence by taking small steps. Talk to yourself in English. The first step I took was simply starting to talking to myself in English. I know it sounds odd, but it was a game changer. At first, I'd just narrate what I was doing. For example, while cooking, I'd say things like, "I'm chopping onions," or "Next, I'll add some salt." Speaking aloud allowed me to feel the language, hear my own voice, and get used to the flow of sentences in English. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes I felt embarrassed, even though I was alone, but I kept pushing forward. I realized that self practice gave me a safe space to make mistakes without judgment. I could be as silly as I wanted, and it was okay, because it was all part of learning. Gradually, I started forming longer sentences, describing my feelings, or even pretending to tell a story. Why this works? Talking to yourself may feel strange, but it builds confidence by allowing you to practice without fear. You get used to hearing your own voice in English and begin to feel more comfortable speaking. Label 2: Surround yourself with English. Full immersion in your daily life. My next strategy was to immerse myself in English as much as possible. This meant changing the language settings on my phone and computer to English, listening to English music, watching English TV shows, and reading simple articles. I even started keeping a little journal in English where I'd write about my day. Immersion helped me see English in everyday life. When I watched a show, I paid close attention to how people greeted each other, joked, or talked about their day. Little by little, I picked up phrases and expressions that are commonly used, and I began to use them in my practice. One of my favorite activities was watching YouTube videos from English-speaking vloggers. These videos were easy to follow and very conversational. I'd listen carefully, mimic their expressions, and even pause to repeat certain phrases. It was like having a mini English lesson from the comfort of my room. Why this works? Full immersion is a powerful way to learn. By surrounding yourself with English, you hear it naturally and often, which helps you pick up on phrases and accents more quickly. Label 3: Practicing with friends. Find a buddy for language practice. Soon, I realized that practicing alone could only take me so far. So I asked my friend Sarah, who also wanted to improve her English, if she'd be willing to practice speaking with me. We both agreed to meet once a week for English sessions where we'd only speak English. This was challenging, especially at first, but it helped us both. In these conversations, we didn't worry too much about grammar or mistakes. Instead, we focused on communicating our thoughts and making the conversation flow. We laughed a lot at our blunders, which made the practice enjoyable. We also learned from each other's mistakes and helped each other find the right words. Our conversation started simple, talking about things like our favorite foods or plans for the weekend. Over time, we began discussing more complex topics, like our goals or dreams for the future. Practicing with Sarah showed me that conversation is about connection, not perfection. Why this works. Practicing with someone you know creates a comfortable environment where you can make mistakes without fear. Having a partner also gives you a chance to learn from someone else's approach and grow together. Label 4. Engaging with native speakers. Language exchange groups. As my confidence grew, I decided to join a local language exchange group. Meeting native English speakers felt intimidating at first, but I knew this would be a big step forward. I remember one of my first conversations with Tom, a native English speaker in the group. He asked me about my hobbies, and I struggled to explain myself clearly, but he was very patient. Talking to native speakers helped me understand the rhythm and flow of natural conversations. They'd correct my mistakes gently and show me simpler ways to say things. I learned new phrases like "what's up" or "that sounds awesome." These phrases might seem basic, but they were things I'd never learned from a textbook. The more I spoke with native speakers, the more confident I felt. They helped me understand cultural expressions and slang that I couldn't learn from textbooks. Each time I went, I noticed my vocabulary and confidence growing. Why this works? Engaging with native speakers pushes you out of your comfort zone and helps you learn conversational language that's rarely found in books. It also exposes you to real-life English, including slang and idiomatic expressions. Label 5. Focusing on pronunciation. Perfecting my accent and intonation. One day I realized my accent and intonation could use some work. I noticed that native speakers didn't just say words, they spoke with a certain rhythm and emotion. I wanted to sound more natural, so I started focusing on pronunciation. I found some online videos that broke down common sounds in English, and I practiced repeating them. I also tried shadowing, where I'd listen to a native speaker say something and immediately repeat it, trying to match their intonation and pronunciation exactly. This exercise was harder than it sounded, but it helped me a lot. Over time, my pronunciation improved, and I started to feel more confident about how I sounded in English. Why this works? Focusing on pronunciation and intonation makes you sound more natural. Practicing these aspects helps you express yourself with more ease and confidence, which is essential for clear communication. Label 6. Using technology, recording myself, and using language apps. Technology became a big part of my journey. I used language apps to practice vocabulary and pronunciation. One of the most effective things I did was record myself speaking and listen back. Recording felt strange at first, but it helped me understand how I sounded and spot areas for improvement. Hearing myself talk was like having a mirror for my speech. Sometimes I'd notice I was speaking too quickly, or that I wasn't emphasizing certain words correctly. Listening to my recordings helped me make small adjustments, and soon, I started sounding more like a native speaker. Why this works? Technology provides valuable tools for practice. Recording yourself allows you to listen objectively and make improvements based on what you hear, while language apps provide exercises that strengthen vocabulary and pronunciation. Label 7. Setting realistic goals, small wins, lead to big success. One thing that kept me motivated was setting small, realistic goals. Each week I'd set a target like learn 5 new phrases or talk to Sarah for 30 minutes. These small goals gave me a sense of accomplishment and encouraged me to keep going. I'd celebrate each milestone, and it reminded me that every bit of progress counts. Over time, all those small goals added up. I realized that setting small, achievable goals allowed me to build my skills steadily without feeling overwhelmed. Why this works? Setting small goals gives you achievable milestones, which helps you stay motivated. It also makes the learning process feel less daunting and more manageable. Label 8. Embracing consistency. The key to fluency. Learning to speak English fluently isn't a quick process, but consistency is what made the difference. Even on days when I didn't feel like practicing, I'd remind myself of why I started, and I'd make sure to practice at least a little. It could be a quick conversation with Sarah, a YouTube video, or even just talking to myself in the mirror. The important thing was to keep going. Why this works? Consistency is crucial in language learning. Regular practice, even in small amounts, builds a strong foundation and reinforces what you've learned. Label 9. Breaking free from the fear of mistakes. Embracing imperfection. One of the hardest things for me, and maybe for anyone learning to speak a new language, was letting go of the fear of making mistakes. In the beginning, I was terrified of saying something wrong. What if people laughed? What if I embarrassed myself? These thoughts kept me quiet, even when I wanted to speak. But as I practiced more and more, I began to realize something important. Everyone makes mistakes. I remember one day during a conversation with Sarah, I kept mixing up past and present tenses. Instead of laughing, she just smiled and helped me correct myself. She reminded me that every mistake was a step toward improvement. From that day, I decided to stop being afraid. Instead, I saw every mistake as a learning opportunity. I reminded myself that no one becomes fluent without making a few errors along the way. I even started joking with myself, calling mistakes my learning moments. Why this works? Accepting that mistakes are part of the process allows you to focus on progress instead of perfection. When you stop fearing errors, you free yourself to learn and grow faster. Label 10. Practicing thought to speech, turning thoughts into words in real time. Another big challenge was learning to speak without overthinking. I'd often find myself translating each sentence in my head before saying it, which made conversations feel slow and unnatural. To overcome this, I started practicing thought-to-speech exercises, where I'd try to say whatever came to mind in English without pausing to translate. At first, it was hard. I'd get stuck, lose track of my thoughts, and sometimes say things that didn't make much sense. But over time, I found myself hesitating less and speaking more naturally. I practiced with simple thoughts first, like, I'm hungry, or the weather is nice. Then I moved on to longer, more complex sentences. The more I practiced, the faster my brain got at forming sentences directly in English. One technique that helped me was word association. I'd look around my room and pick an object like a lamp and just start describing it. This lamp is tall, has a bright light, and makes my room cozy. The goal was to say whatever came to mind, training my brain to think and speak in English. Why this works? Training yourself to speak without translating helps you sound more fluent. It allows you to think directly in English, making conversations smoother and more natural. Label 11. Building vocabulary. Focusing on high-frequency words. A big realization for me was that I didn't need to know every word to speak well. I only needed the most commonly used words and phrases to hold a conversation. So, I started focusing on high-frequency words, or words that are used often in everyday English. I made flashcards of these words and phrases and reviewed them daily. I'd focus on phrases like, "Can you help me with?" or "I'm not sure if," instead of trying to memorize hundreds of random words. This approach helped me feel prepared for real-life conversations, and I felt more confident because I knew I had the right words at hand. To add variety, I'd use the words in sentences while talking to myself. For example, if one of my words was confused, I'd say things like, "I'm confused about this problem," or "She looked confused." Practicing in this way helped me remember the words and use them naturally. Why this works? Building a practical vocabulary of high-frequency words allows you to communicate effectively without overwhelming yourself. It focuses your learning on the language you'll actually use. Label 12. Reading aloud. Practicing pronunciation and flow. One of the most effective exercises I did was reading aloud. I'd pick simple English books, like children's stories or beginner novels, and read them out loud. Reading out loud helped me practice my pronunciation, intonation, and flow. It also allowed me to get comfortable with longer sentences. Sometimes I'd record myself reading so I could listen back and notice areas for improvement. I paid attention to my pronunciation of certain tricky words and tried to sound more natural each time. Over time, reading aloud improved my fluency and made me feel more comfortable with English sounds. One day I realized I could read an entire paragraph without stopping to think about the words. That moment felt like a big win. I knew then that all those small practices were adding up. Why this works? Reading aloud lets you practice pronunciation and sentence flow in a controlled way. It helps build confidence, especially with longer sentences, and improves your overall speaking ability. Label 13. Practicing speaking in different situations. Preparing for real conversations. Once I felt comfortable speaking with Sarah and in language exchanges, I started pushing myself to practice in real situations. I'd order food in English, ask for directions, and even chat briefly with strangers. These were small moments, but they helped me prepare for real-life conversations. One time, I met a tourist who needed help finding a bus stop. I was nervous at first, but I offered to help, explaining directions in English. It was a simple conversation, but it boosted my confidence immensely. I realized that these small interactions, though brief, were training me to speak in real, unpredictable situations. Practicing in different situations also helped me become adaptable. Every person has a different way of speaking, so learning to follow conversations with different people improved my listening skills too. Why this works? Practicing in real-life situations prepares you for real conversations. It builds adaptability and confidence, making it easier to speak naturally with people in everyday settings. Label 14, celebrating small wins. Tracking progress and staying motivated. Throughout my journey, I learned the importance of celebrating my small wins. I started keeping a journal where I'd write down every achievement, no matter how small. It might be something like, spoke to a native speaker today, or read an entire page without stopping. Writing down my wins helped me see my progress and stay motivated. One day I flipped through my journal and saw how far I'd come. I was no longer the person who was too shy to say hello. I could hold conversations, express my thoughts, and even joke around a little in English. Seeing my progress made me proud and pushed me to keep going. Why this works? Celebrating small wins helps you stay motivated and see your progress over time. It's a reminder that every effort counts and it keeps you focused on your goal. Finding confidence in your voice. A journey of self-discovery. As I look back on my journey, there's one thing I know for sure. Speaking English became more than just about language for me. It became a way of finding confidence in my voice, expressing myself, and discovering parts of who I am. Speaking in a new language forces you to put yourself out there, to be vulnerable, and to have courage. One day I was having a conversation with my friend Sarah, who'd been with me through this whole process. She told me, "Alex, you're not just better at English. You're more confident, more outgoing, and more willing to take risks." At first, I hadn't noticed these changes, but when I looked back, I saw that she was right. Learning English had pushed me to face my fears, to laugh at my mistakes, and to grow. The boy who once hesitated to say hello was now sharing his story, hoping it would inspire others. I had become someone who didn't just want to understand English, I wanted to be understood. Label 15. Cultivating consistency. Making practice. Part of everyday life. One thing I realized early on was that learning a language is like a garden. It doesn't grow if you only water it once in a while. It needs consistent care, attention, and a little bit of patience. So I made a commitment to practice every day, even if it was just 10 or 15 minutes. I'd set reminders on my phone to fit in short practice sessions, no matter how busy my day was. Some days, I didn't feel like practicing, but I'd remind myself that each practice, no matter how small, was a step closer to fluency. Slowly, these short sessions turned into a daily habit. Practicing English became as natural as brushing my teeth or eating breakfast. And before I knew it, I didn't even have to remind myself. I just did it. Why this works? Consistency builds momentum. Even small daily practices add up over time, creating a solid foundation for speaking fluency. Label 16, using visualization techniques. Preparing for real-life situations. One technique that helped me a lot was visualization. Before a social event or a meeting, I'd take a few minutes to imagine myself speaking confidently. I'd picture myself speaking clearly, understanding others, and responding without hesitation. This helped me feel prepared and less anxious when I was actually in those situations. Visualization isn't magic, but it does work. By imagining myself speaking successfully, I built up my confidence and prepared my mind for the experience. It helped me believe in my abilities and approach conversations with a calm, positive attitude. Why this works? Visualization prepares your mind for real situations, reducing anxiety and boosting confidence. It helps you feel ready before the moment arrives. Label 17, creating an English environment, immersing myself in the language. Another strategy that transformed my progress was creating an English-rich environment around me. I realized that the more I surrounded myself with English, the easier it became to speak it. I'd listen to English music, watch movies with English subtitles, and even set my phone language to English. My favorite part was changing my social media settings to English. I'd see posts, comments, and even ads in English, which helped me stay immersed in the language. It might sound like a small change, but every exposure helped reinforce my understanding and my vocabulary. Sometimes I'd even think to myself in English, talking through my day in my mind. This helped me practice forming sentences and phrases, even when I wasn't speaking out loud. Over time, this mental immersion became second nature, and I found myself thinking in English without even realizing it. Why this works? Immersion surrounds you with the language, helping you become comfortable with its rhythm and vocabulary. It creates a natural environment for learning, even when you're not actively studying. Reflecting on the journey, lessons learned. If there's one piece of advice I'd give anyone who's struggling to speak English, it's this: be kind to yourself. Language learning is a journey, not a race. There will be days when you feel stuck, when the words don't come out right, and when you feel like giving up. But remember, every learner has been there. Progress is slow but steady, and each practice session, each conversation, and each mistake is a step forward. For me, the journey to fluency taught me patience, courage, and the power of self-belief. I learned that every effort, no matter how small, contributes to the bigger picture. I learned to celebrate my progress, forgive my mistakes, and keep moving forward, one word at a time. Learning to listen, finding confidence through understanding others. One of the biggest turning points in my journey was realizing that speaking English isn't just about talking, it's about listening too. I used to focus only on how I sounded, but soon I noticed that understanding others was just as important. I found that the more I practiced listening carefully, the better I became at responding naturally. One day I was listening to Sarah talk about her travels, and I found myself nodding along, fully following what she was saying. In that moment, I felt a deep sense of accomplishment. Listening had helped me connect with her story on a level I hadn't before. I was beginning to understand not just the language, but the feelings and experiences behind the words. That felt like a new kind of fluency. Why this works? Listening helps you build natural conversation skills. It allows you to respond meaningfully, showing that speaking English is a two-way street and creating deeper connections. Building real connections through language. As my confidence grew, so did my social circle. I started to feel more comfortable talking to people from different backgrounds. I realized that language is a bridge. connecting people in ways I hadn't expected. It wasn't just about the words, but about sharing ideas, emotions, and experiences. I remember meeting a traveler from Spain who was also learning English. We'd laugh over our struggles with pronunciation and grammar, encouraging each other. Sharing that moment helped me see that learning English wasn't only about fluency, it was about understanding, patience, and forming friendships with people I might never have met otherwise. Each time I reached out to speak with someone new, I felt a growing sense of purpose. Language had unlocked a world of experiences and people I'd never have connected with otherwise. It was like opening a door to a new way of seeing the world. Why this works? Building connections through language gives you real-world motivation to keep improving. It reinforces why learning to speak fluently is meaningful, beyond just the technical aspects. Embracing the bigger picture. Learning for a lifetime. As I kept practicing, I realized that English learning, or any language learning, isn't something with a finish line. I used to think that once I became fluent, I'd be done. But I began to see that this was only the beginning of a lifelong journey. I could always learn more, improve my accent, or discover new vocabulary. This realization actually relieved a lot of pressure. Instead of feeling like I had to achieve perfect English, I saw it as an ongoing process. There would always be more to learn, but that's what made it exciting. Language isn't static, it's constantly changing and adapting. Accepting that made me feel like a true learner, always curious, always growing. Why this works? Viewing language learning as a lifelong journey takes the pressure off achieving perfection and allows you to enjoy continuous improvement.